Now, proceedings are active as the police officer Wayne Cousins has been charged with Sarah Everard's murder and kidnapping, so we'll stay away from all the details of that case, of course. But let's talk about those ugly scenes on Clapham Common last night, if we can, to begin with. That banned vigil for Sarah Everard. Hundreds turned up anyway. There were scuffles when the police moved in to remove some protesters. Who is to blame, in your view, for that violence?
If I may, first, Tom, I would just like to take a moment to reflect on why people were gathering yesterday, not just in Clapham, but also in the virtual vigil. And of course, it was to mark the terrible, terrible events of this week with Sarah Everard. And I know that our thoughts are very much with her friends and family who are suffering unimaginably at the moment with their loss. And that is why, when we have heard people's reactions to the terrible, terrible news, we've seen women across the country share their own experiences. We know that people wanted to come together yesterday, to mark those experiences, but also to pay their respects to the family. So I think for the overwhelming majority of people, yesterday was a peaceful event, and I saw the photographs of people laying flowers, including, of course, the Duchess of Cambridge laying flowers, and it was a peaceful event, and it was respectful, and it was, I hope, giving comfort to people who need to be given comfort at the moment. But the scenes last night that we have seen, sadly, I mean, they're very upsetting, some of those scenes.
And who's to blame for them, though, in your view?
Well, the Home Secretary rightly has asked the Met Commissioner to draw a report together of what is happening, and we will await the results of that report with great interest. But I think it is important that we remember that the overwhelming majority of people were able to take part peacefully yesterday in the vigil, and indeed came with only the intent of being peaceful. It wasn't a question of anyone, people wanting to come to cause trouble. So we're going to have to see what the report says and draw conclusions from that. But I do also recognise that policing large public events is very difficult for the police at the best of times. And so I'm sure that all these factors will be weighed up in that report.
Okay, if I understand you correctly, you don't want to either criticise nor condone police actions on Clapham Common last night. Is that correct?
Well, no. That's Tom. I've said I found some of those scenes very upsetting. But as I say, the Home Secretary's response to that has been to ask the Met Commissioner for a report. I don't feel this morning, given it is only hours since those images were captured on social media and have appeared in our papers, I don't feel at this point in time, before the report has been given, that I should preempt that. But I most certainly do agree with people who say that those images are very upsetting, because they are.
Were people wrong to go to that vigil then at 6 p.m. last night? Were they wrong to drop off flowers early or often in the afternoon? Because, of course, that vigil was deemed an illegal gathering under the government's coronavirus rules.
Well, the dropping off of flowers, I don't believe fell within those regulations. Again, I think people have paid their respects as they feel they're able to. But the COVID regulations are do set down rules in relation to gatherings of people, because we're still in the middle of this pandemic, very sadly. And so that was why I was very pleased that the organisers of the vigil organised instead a virtual vigil, which I myself took part in, so that we could try to mark our respects in ways other than visiting the scene in Clapham Common.
I think you're saying people were wrong to go to that vigil in large groups, if I can read between the lines. You're not answering the direct question, but should a vigil have been held all together? I mean, other vigils were held around the country, socially distanced. Should there not have been some form of social distancing vigil allowed on Clapham Common?
Well, Tom, if I may just pick you up on the previous point.
Please do.
People went to lay flowers yesterday. They went by themselves or they went with another person, as they are permitted to do so under the regulations. But the organised gathering that the organisers had hoped to do, the police did not believe that fell within the allowed activity within the regulations. And this is, I appreciate this is incredibly complex, but I wouldn't want to, we mustn't treat, please, all of the many hundreds, indeed possibly even higher than that, numbers of women and other people who went to visit Clapham yesterday. It just wouldn't be right to class them all as being in that category of a vigil, because they were going, a great many of them were going by themselves to lay a flower, and of course allowed.
I understand that, and I think a lot of people may share your sympathies, but I think if you were one of those women last night, you wouldn't know whether you were doing the right thing or not by going at 6 p.m. Can you clarify, was it the right thing then to go at 6 p.m. to that vigil or not?
Well, the organisers of the vigil had cancelled the vigil, and so they'd organised the virtual vigil in its place. Again, there is no time limit on when the COVID regulations apply. We are still in the middle of this pandemic. Only yesterday, 121 people lost their lives. This is why these regulations were in place. But if someone was there, either by themselves or with a friend exercising, then that was within the rules. So this is why I appreciate it's really complicated, but I've got to try and help you and others navigate our way through this. I know it's very difficult. I know that, as I say, the overwhelming majority of people who visited yesterday did so in peace. And I found it very, very moving to see for myself the flowers around the bandstand.
The thing is, the police could also say, of course, that they were just imposing the law imposed by the government. They don't make the law, they just have to enforce it. So do you have sympathy for their argument?
Well, that's always the case. And we're very, very careful to ensure the operational decisions are, of course, a matter for the police. I mean, nobody wants to be in a situation where politicians are directing police officers how to behave operationally. And I also know that it can be very difficult to police large public events in the best of times. They are making decisions in the moment. But and for the overwhelming majority of the day, the events passed peacefully and were dealt with. I think people were there in a very respectful, very mindful manner. But those scenes are very upsetting. And as I say, the Met Commissioner will be producing a report for the Home Secretary outlining how those scenes came to be. And I don't feel I can preempt the results of that report before I've seen it.
OK, let's talk about the wider, bigger issue here after Sir Everard's death. You've reopened the public consultation on your strategy to tackle violence against women and girls in the light of her killing and the public outpouring. We're told it'll be ready this year. Can I ask, in your view, do you think the police have enough powers to clamp down on sexual harassment in public at the moment?
Well, we've run the largest ever public survey on tackling violence against women and girls, and that is with the view to having members of the public really help shape the strategy that we'll be bringing in later this year. But we reopened the survey on Friday. We got a 15,000 responses before Friday. And then when we reopened it at 6 p.m. on Friday, since then, we've had more than 20,000 responses. So this is an extraordinary response. We're really grateful to everybody who has put their views forward already. And if anyone's listening who would like to do the same, then please do look at the gov.uk website to be able to share your views. But it's really significant because having brought the domestic abuse bill before Parliament and bringing this really landmark piece of legislation hopefully into law very soon. We want to do the same for other forms of violence against women and girls, which includes sexual harassment in the street, but also includes things such as FGM and forced marriage and stalking. So this is very much part of our programme of work to really crack down and stop those crimes that disproportionately affect women and girls.
Right, but as you'll know, Nimco Ali, who's an independent Home Office advisor, has said in the last day or two that there is still a loophole that allows men to direct explicit sexual and abusive comments to women in the street. And she calls that absolutely a form of violence towards women. Is there a need for a new offence to be created in law that would stop abusive comments by men to women on the street?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's great that we've got Nimco on board as an advisor to us, and she, I think she demonstrates just how much power and ability she brings to that role. We have been very clear that we are listening to all suggestions. I don't want to preempt what may come out of this survey.
It's possible,
and I as well, we're not. Look, nothing is off the table at the moment. We absolutely want to understand what people's experiences are and what we can do to address those. And just also to help listeners understand, we're not just conducting this public survey. We are also conducting a specialist survey with victims and survivors with the help of specialist charities who are helping them, because of course it could be very, very distressful for victims and survivors to contribute their views in a public survey. And we're also using focus groups just to make sure that we're reaching all parts of society in a way that public surveys sadly don't always manage. So it's a huge body of work that's been going on across my department in order to ensure that this strategy, when we produce it, is absolutely meaningful and will make a huge change to people's day-to-day lives.
You do have an opportunity this week, if you wanted to toughen up legislation on these sorts of things. So Harriet Harman, as I'm sure you know, is bringing an amendment to the Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill when it turns to the Commons this week to make curb crawling to harass women illegal. It's illegal already to curb crawl to try and get sex if you're a man, but it's not illegal to just simply drive along the side of the street harassing women out your car window. Would you accept that amendment? Is that a good thing to do now?
Well, I'm going to listen very carefully to the debates in Parliament over the next 2 days. I mean, you would not expect me to to confirm or deny government policy on a radio show.
It's a good time to do it. Why not? People are interested.
Well, we will listen very carefully to the debate over the next 2 days, and then, of course, the bill will be scrutinised even more in Bill Committee, and it will be my pleasure to take that through the stages of scrutiny. But we're very, as I say, I would hope that people understand from our work on the domestic abuse bill just how ambitious we are to tackle crimes that disproportionately affect women and girls, and indeed our willingness to listen to the evidence. So as I say, in the DA bill, we are bringing forward amendments in the Lords to prohibit non-fatal strangulation and to prohibit threats to use revenge porn. And we have already added the amendment in relation to the so-called rough sex defence. So that we really are, listening through the survey, but also through our legislative work to try to address some of these really, really difficult issues that are faced by women.
Okay, let me just put one more option to you. This is a suggestion from an SNP front bench, and I think a Green peer in the House of Lords as well, for a curfew to be looked at, banning men from the streets after 6 p.m. in areas where women have been killed. Is that one of the options you'll look at?
Gosh, I mean, I think men should be part of this conversation and part of the solution. We can't exclude men from these debates. There will be, I know, men listening who want to know how they can help ensure that women don't feel unsafe in the streets. And, people have been asking me for suggestions. So that goes, I have to say, very much against the approach that I take, and I know the government takes to this issue, which is that this women feeling safe in the street is a matter for the whole of society. We've got to ask ourselves questions such as, what is the role of internet porn in some of these attitudes that are being displayed? What can we do to ensure that our boys are growing up into fine young men who know that they shouldn't be treating women in some of the ways that has been described by women over the last few days. But men absolutely have to be part of this discussion. We can't exclude them. Okay.
Let's move on a little bit and talk about Westminster. female representation in Westminster. Of course, it was International Women's Day last week. Now, I know your argument that there are a lot of more Tory women MPs elected in 2019 than has been in the past, and there are quite a few Tory junior ministers coming up now. But there are still only 5 members of the cabinet out of 27 who are women. Should the Prime Minister have more women in the cabinet?
Well, I think just taking you back to the point about Parliament, yes, we have more Conservative MPs, female MPs, than we have ever before, but no one wants us to rest on our laurels where we are at the moment. And we're very much working to encourage more women to stand for public office, not just in the House of Commons, but also at local government, because...
Question was about the cabinet, though. Sorry to come in.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 out of 27.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is a real problem nationally with women in local councils. So I do think that's a really important part of the conversation. But in terms of cabinet, look, the Prime Minister he has a cabinet that is incredibly representative in terms of ethnicity, and he's spoken of his ambitions in terms of 50-50 representation in Parliament. And I know that he takes very seriously the issue of representation and making sure that our cabinet and our parliamentary party reflect society. So there is a huge amount of work that fabulous female ministers, junior ministers, are doing, both in all sorts of departments, health, education, and elsewhere. So I think there's a real body of talented female colleagues, also many talented male colleagues, and the Prime Minister will be making any such decisions in due course in terms of who will best represent his government, I'm sure, on their merits.
OK, I want to bring Gloria in a second, but one final one from me on this subject. Where is your boss, the Home Secretary, this morning? It's always great to have you on the show, Vicky, and we hope you come back. But it's quite a big moment for the nation, isn't it? Yet the Home Secretary hasn't done a single interview. She's put out statements. Is this not a moment to put herself up rather than sending out one of her junior ministers?
Well, on 2 fronts, Tom. First of all, violence against women and girls is my portfolio, and I think actually the Home Secretary is to be commended for ensuring that the minister in her department who is responsible for this, or has day-to-day responsibility for this, is answering questions and is explaining our policies. But secondly, I've had texts with her this morning already. She's working very, very hard on the situation that has unfolded overnight. So she is working very hard today. She may not be on your show, Tom, and I'll make sure that your disappointment is communicated to her. But I think actually she is showing real leadership, A, in asking for that report from the Met Commissioner, and secondly, getting on with the job but in the Home Office and ensuring that we are listening to the concerns that have been expressed about what happened last night.
Victoria, hi, it's Gloria. Good to talk to you this morning. You mentioned, or you posed the question, what is the role of internet porn? It's hard not to conclude that it is a contributing factor to how young boys and men view women. How can we stop young boys watching it?
Well, Gloria, this is a very, very complex area, as you will appreciate. There are measures that we can impose on tech companies to ensure that the internet is not it's not easy to access internet porn if you are underage. And those measures are being debated and looked at in the context of the online safety bill that will be coming before Parliament this year. But there's also, I think, much more we as a society need to be doing to, first of all, to help mums and dads understand how easy it is for young people to access these sites or these images. I think it can be, I know as a parent, but I think, speaking to my friends who are mums and dads as well, it's the one area that we probably really worry about for our children is internet safety and how we can help them navigate their way through it. And also building resilience in young people. When we know that certainly my 9-year-old is better at using my mobile phone than I am. We need to build resilience in our young people so that they know, for example, if they are asked to send an image of themselves, an indecent image of themselves, that they can have the confidence to say no. That's one of the most troubling aspects of the work that we're doing on internet safety is just how common it is now for young people to share intimate images. And they do so perhaps not realising that once it's on the internet, it stays there and it can be shared widely. And so we've got to try and help them understand that so that
Victoria,
as they're growing,
sorry.
they're not doing.
Sorry to interrupt. We're going to have to let you go. We're running out of time rapidly. One final question, though, quickly off this subject, but it is a matter for you as Crime Prevention Minister. I know you'll be aware of it. Dog theft in coronavirus, in the lockdown. It's increased 250%, largely because of the huge rise in prices for puppies. How much does dog theft trouble you?
Well, as the proud owner of a whippet, it worries me a very great deal. I think it's absolutely horrifying that people are having their much-loved pets stolen. So we're very, very aware of this. We're looking into it carefully because we absolutely understand public concern about this, and we want to ensure that these dreadful criminals who are stealing people's much-loved pets are brought to justice.